Welcome to the Finding Phil podcast, where I set out to find Phil through discussions of recovery and self-discovery. Hi, my name is Phil. All right, welcome back, listeners. My name's Philip Hendrick. I am your host. And today we are going to talk a little bit my native language, or my vocational language, that is, in carpentry. And I'll tell you, before we get into the episode, I'm going to confess that I've still been really busy with my workload. And so I didn't have time to really try to plan out a guest. I want to get guests back on, but I did plan this episode. As a matter of fact, I've been meditating on today's topic for several days now. And and I'll get personal about why I was meditating. It's, really, I have questioned my title of this podcast so many times because I'm like, man, that just sounds narcissistic, the Finding Phil podcast. But really, it's meant to be, I want to just be vulnerable to y'all. I want to be open with y'all. I want to just kind of take you along with me on my journey in recovery and self-discovery, which I know my discovery of my self-identity is in Christ Jesus. But I want to take you all on that journey with me. And maybe we can all learn. So as I try to prepare lessons, I'm learning myself, or as I'm learning, I'm possibly preparing a lesson or an episode to share with you all. So, but before we get into the episode, I want to just say thank you again for tuning in every week. Now this week I am doing a YouTube video because I'm just going to try to simplify it, because I believe that there's some people that want to tune in this way. So I want to try to do my best to keep doing this if I can. And then, but if you're tuning in through YouTube, or if you're tuning in through a podcasting app, can you please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button? If there's an option to do a review, please do that, or just hit like on this particular episode if you're watching on YouTube. Figure out how you can possibly engage. It's going to encourage me a little bit. I guess I'm just being vulnerable to you there by saying that. It'll encourage me if I hear back from you, and if this is helping you at all in your daily walk, or just between getting you from one meeting to the next. So, well, let's get on to the episode. So this week, I've been meditating on my nature of wanting to fix things. So as far back as I can remember, I've liked to fix. I haven't necessarily been a puzzle person or like a mechanic. But I do like to create, and I love creating solutions. And so one of my favorite things to do as a carpenter is actually making jigs. A jig that you're creating a tool to make a job go easier or more efficient. So it's part of that fixing nature. Of course, if we got something going on here in the house, if the car breaks down, that's like, I don't know, that's one of the areas I feel like I shine in. If Tiffany ever calls me because she's broke down on the side of the road, or maybe there's, unfortunately there's been accidents, rear end accidents. She's been hit by other people, but I don't know. I just go into, all right, solution mode, and I don't get emotional. I don't get just embarrassed with myself in those situations. As a matter of fact, I see those as some of my more proud moments. But anyways, I like the solution. I like just, all right, this is what we do. This is the next step in the process. And I have really applied that or tried to do that in my walk as a believer in Jesus Christ. And in some areas, you can keep it really simple, and there's a quick fix. But I'm going to tell you, some things, no matter how badly I want to, there's just no quick fix. So, I mean, my best example would be quitting drinking. I quit drinking alcohol, just over 33 months ago now. And it wasn't the first time I'd quit drinking. As a matter of fact, I quit drinking several times over the last 20 years. I'd quit for 6 months, or I'd quit for a year because, I'm trying to control it. And we all know that that's a lie. Because basically every time I would start drinking again, I just kind of pick up right where I left off. So, but my point is, when I finally got myself into recovery, I quit drinking again. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be easy for me to stay sober. I think that's why I'm doing this podcast. This is the 12th step in recovery for me, is to take the message to you guys, or maybe people that haven't heard the message before. I do my meetings every week, even under this lockdown, or I should say these stay-at-home orders where we're not having meetings at the church building. Hey, we're still doing our meetings online with Zoom conferencing. I think as long as I continue to work the steps and I continue my meetings, I don't think staying sober is going to be difficult. I don't want to downplay that. I'm sure, I could be setting myself up for disaster by thinking that it's ever going to be easy. But my point is quitting drinking was a quick fix. Now, fixing all of the reasons why I was drinking, well, that's a totally different story. And I don't think there is a quick fix for that. And that's why I do the meetings every week. So now the verse I kind of ran across to base this episode on is in Proverbs 24, verse 3. It says, "By wisdom a house is built, and through understanding it is established. Through knowledge its rooms are filled with rare and beautiful treasures." That really just sounds a lot like the house I grew up in. It sounds a lot like the lives that my mom and dad have built for themselves. It sounds a lot like the people, even today, that I look up to, I admire. I see those people, and I really admire them. And that's what I wish I would have done for my life. Now, I have regrets, and I'm learning recently that I have shame. But I do have faith. I have trust, and I do believe that my sins are forgiven, and I do believe that God cares deeply to repair the damage that I've done with the bad choices I've made in life. But I look at that verse, and I look at those, especially my parents. I really admire them. They're godly people. They've just made good choices in life. Well, they're human, and sure, they've made mistakes. But I mean, all in all, life is working out pretty well for them. I would say closely to how they planned. But if they're listening, they might say, well, you don't understand how many challenges we had. But I do see them as people that built a house based on wisdom. They made the right choices early on, and that's what they built their foundations on. And they are believers in Jesus Christ, and that's even a more firm foundation to build upon. But in Matthew 7, we'll read a little bit more about how a house is built. And in verse 24, it says, "Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house. Yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock." That should be a capital R, the rock. "But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash." And so I have built a family of 5. I've got my beautiful wife, Tiffany, who you all have met in previous episodes, and then we have our 3 wonderful children. And I see this happening in their life, and I see our home being built on that principle. I believe we are building our family on the firm foundation, the rock, Christ Jesus. But in my own personal life, when I had to bring myself to turn back towards Christ and to actually make him Lord of my life and to actually be what I would call a practicing Christian or a follower of Jesus, my house was sinking in the sand. It was leaning. It was crooked. It was shifting. So in carpentry, you can come into a home, if you're a handyman, and you walk into a home that's 75 years old, and you've got some doors that are getting stuck. They're rubbing when you open and close them. It's because that house has shifted a little bit, and so that door has racked and it's pinching. And well, yeah, you can go in and you can do a quick little fix. You can take that door off the hinges and you can just trim the door to fit the new shape of the opening. You know, you can go up to another area and you could try to shim something and put some scribe molding or try to cut some scribe around some crooked areas and make that look nice and tight. And maybe you've got cracks in the wall, and you could go in with some caulk or some spackling. You can fill in those cracks and you can paint over it, and it'll look good for a little bit. But what will happen is if that home's foundation remains on the sand, if that foundation isn't secure, if that foundation is shifting, well, then those problems are just going to keep cycling back. They're going to keep coming back. You know, a few episodes we talked about that. In my own life, I feel like I had this circular motion happening, this cycle where I keep coming back around to the same point. But I see progress because I see that the time of that cycle shortening. And so the frequency of coming back to home base, coming back to that corrective point is happening more often. So that's good. But, you know, you'll see that cycle as you're trying to, you know, patch and fix things in your home, even though you still have this shifting foundation. You know, so before my first CR meeting, I had already done the research about Celebrate Recovery and what I thought I was going to see or get into when I decided I needed help. I'd gotten online. I'd found out that they have these workbooks that you work through the steps, the 12 steps of recovery and the 8 principles that are found in Celebrate Recovery. And I was like, I got to fix it. I got to patch things up, got to get things nice and tidy. And so I had the books ordered on Amazon before I even went to my first meeting. I think by my second meeting, I was talking to one of the ministry leaders there. I was like, oh yeah, I got the books. I'm working through the steps. He's like, well, you know, maybe we could sit down sometime and work on those together. And I had no idea what he was talking about, but I wanted to fix it. I wanted to fix it quick. I wanted to get this done. I wanted to get on to the next chapter. And so I started doing these workbooks, which, if you're not familiar with Celebrate Recovery, if you are familiar with Celebrate Recovery, you're going to understand you're not supposed to work through these steps alone. I was just insisting on doing this because I was trying to do this by myself. And that's pretty much what I'm trying to do a lot of the time. I'm trying to take care of things by myself. I don't ask for help very often. I don't even ask for help for my wife very often. Of course, I'll ask her to serve me, hey, what's for dinner and stuff like that. But that's not what I'm talking about. I don't ask her for help when I'm really in a tight spot, when I feel like I'm in trouble with something. It doesn't happen very often for me, but that is what happened the night I decided I needed to quit drinking, Anyways, moving on to my point of those workbooks, I wanted to move on. I wanted to get on to the next chapter. So I wanted to just get this fixed quick. So I started with these workbooks right away. And there's several books going through all 12 steps. And eventually I stalled out around step number 4, which is basically taking a moral inventory. And that you can't do that you can try to do it by yourself. But I found that really difficult, and I found myself stalling out. And that's when I learned that, oh no, this is meant to be done as a group with a few different guys. And that, so you're not going through it alone, and that you're getting help moving through these steps, because they're not easy to go through. I'm also a cabinet maker. You all know I've explained that I'm a carpenter. And I do installs for company Shelf Genie, but I also call it like a side hustle, or I fill in the gaps in my calendar by building custom cabinets. And so I've had a cabinet project that I've been working on and have been behind on. And but now I'd like to think I'm actually, I am done with that job. And so I'm getting myself back on track. But I was working on that job site last week. It was nice when I got my laser out and I started finding out where the high points were in the room, and I started laying out a level line. It was nice. I didn't have much more than a half of an inch of height difference from one end to the other. And that's actually a pretty good thing, considering that this house, I don't know the exact age of the house, but it's more historical district here in San Antonio, and it's actually a house flip. And it's a big renovation, and part of the, what do they call it, the Historical Preservation Society or something like that. And it is it was really crooked. I didn't see it when it was before they got it leveled, but I can imagine how bad it was, because I said, was it as crooked as the house across the street? And that one was really crooked. I mean, that was more crooked than a Willy Wonka house, or I'm sorry, a Dr. Seuss house. And so when he said it was worse than that one, I'm like, oh my goodness, that could not have been fun. And, he said, no, he says, I said, that might have you questioning what you do for a living. And he says, yep, that question crossed our minds a couple times during that process. But it's to get into doing foundation work, to re-level a home that's leaning really bad, it's really crooked. Well, you got to get underneath it, and you got to get down in this deep, dark, scary place. And here in South Texas, man, there's a lot of creepy, crawly, poisonous things in these deep, dark, scary places. And there's nothing fun about it, and there's nothing quick about it. You have to be precise. You have to do your planning. You have to find the load points, and you gotta dig a little bit deeper. Sometimes the old footing is shifting because it wasn't dug deep enough. So there's a lot of deep, dark, dirty work involved in doing some of this foundation work, and in finding, like I said, those load points. What are the areas in your life that keep sinking? Like you try to put some strength into that, or you try to hold up the load or the pressure of life, financial stress or marital stress or relationship stress or work stress. When you get under the load of that, what happens? Does it give in? Does it cave in? Does it sag? Or does it just hold firm? And you find these areas and you say, all right, well, let's dig deep in that area and let's find out what's giving way. And like I said, it can take some time. It can get dirty, and you can get sweaty and question what you're doing and why you're there during that process. But listen, it can feel like it becomes a money pit after a while. As you're trying to get into these little deep, dark spots and you're trying to get things hoisted back up. But remember this, it's not your forever home, okay? Now, this is the home, and this is a vessel for the Holy Spirit, and God wants us to live out our life here on earth with a sense of peace and joy. He doesn't want us to be so burdened by the fact that we're stuck working on a money pit. In John 14, verses 2 and 3, Jesus is talking. This is in red letters. He says, "My Father's house has many rooms. If that were not so, would I have told you that I'm going there to prepare a place for you? If I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am." So, I get encouragement sometimes just in the relatability of Jesus being a carpenter, having been a carpenter here on earth. But I would even presume that he's still a carpenter, because he's talking about how he's building and preparing places for us. And that gives me comfort. That gives me encouragement. And it reminds me that there's probably some joy to be had in this process of rebuilding, of digging into foundation work and finding these load points that are giving way and strengthening them and healing them and fixing them. So Jesus was a carpenter. And so is Chip and Joanna. Well, Chip's the carpenter, but Chip and his wife, Joanna Gaines, I'm sure you all are familiar with that show. And in that show, Joanna is the visionary. She's the one that does she sees the end product before the work even begins. And Chip is the one that has to go in there and make it happen. And you can see the frustration in him sometimes, but man, I love the joy in his heart. He always trusts her because she understands he has placed trust in her vision for the end product. And so he decides he's going to have some joy in the process. And so therefore it becomes some television gold, some of the scenes that you see with Chip and in working through some of the problems they run into, and the fun he has with destroying this old this old wall or this old product that's no longer part of the new vision. And I'm encouraged when I think about Jesus and Chip Gaines and myself as a carpenter, and I see the vision that Joanna has in the projects that they're planning out. And so I see this vision that Jesus has for my life. I was reminded of that today. I read a Facebook post that just talked about the life of somebody that was born in 1900 and everything that they had to get through. And of course, this post was meant to really say, hey, we're going to get through this time that we're in now with COVID-19. But, talking about somebody born in 1900 and going through living through World War I, living through the Spanish flu, the Great Depression, World War II, the Korean War, Vietnam War, and as I was reading it, it didn't take me very long to be like, my grandpa was born in 1900. Bapa. Bapa was my grandpa's name. And Bapa had such joy in his life. He had so much joy in his heart. I have to be inspired by that and know that that's part of my bloodline. That's part of my genealogy. And I want to receive that. And I want to learn how to live with a little bit more joy in my life, and a little bit more joy and understanding and patience with the world around me. I never saw my grandpa shaken by anything. He lived well into his 90s, 94 years old, and a beautiful human being. And I would, if I could end my life, if I could end half as good as Bappa did, I would be a very happy man. So I was inspired and encouraged by his joy and his memory today. And I need to be thinking about that. I need to have some joy in this process that I'm in. I need to understand that it's deep and dark and dirty, and some of these places underneath that I'm trying to dig into and fix, and and actually I should be thankful that I'm not actually having to physically do that, because I don't ever want to have to do foundation work on a house. It just doesn't sound like something I would like to do anymore. I like working on cabinets. That's a lot cleaner work. But maybe you're somewhere in there. Maybe you're somewhere in that process. Maybe you've been just putting up shims and doing shims and trimming and scribing and just trying to make all this patchwork look good. Maybe you've been just caulking the cracks, and then 6 months or a year later, you see these cracks opening up again. You might need to think about that. Think about what's going on in the foundation. All right. I think that's about all I can say about that today. I'm so thankful that you tuned in, and I really appreciate you tuning in every week. Don't forget to send me some sort of encouragement through, like I said, just through a like, a share, a subscription, a review, comment, anything. It's going to help encourage me in this. I have a little bit more time available for me to put in the work to get some guests on in the future. But besides that, thank you again. Tune in next week for another episode. Love you. Bye.